In Scotland, there once lived a poor shepherd whose name was James Hogg. His father and grandfather and grandfather had all been shepherds. It was his business to take care of the sheep, which belonged to a rich landlord by the Ettrick water. Sometimes he had several hundreds of lambs to look after. He drove these to the pastures on the hills and watched them day after day while they fed on the short green grass. He had a dog which he called Sirrah. This dog helped him watch the sheep. He would drive them from place to place as his master wished. Sometimes he would take care of the whole flock while the shepherd was resting or eating his dinner. One dark night, James Hogg was on the hilltop with a flock of 700 lambs. Sirrah was with him. Suddenly, a storm came up. There was thunder and lightning. The wind blew hard. The rain poured. The poor lambs were frightened. The shepherd and his dog could not keep them together. Some of them ran towards the east, some towards the west, and some towards the south. The shepherd soon lost sight of them in the darkness. With his lantern in his hand, he went up and down the rough hills calling for his lambs. 2 or 3 other shepherds joined him in the search. All night long they sought for the lambs. Morning came and still they sought. They looked at the thought in every place where the lambs might have taken shelter. At last James Hogg said, "It's of no use. All we can do is to go home and tell the master that we have lost his whole flock." They had walked a mile or two towards home when they came to edge of a narrow and deep ravine. They looked down and at the bottom they saw some limbs huddled together among the rocks, and there was Sirrah standing guard over them and looking all around for help. "This must be the lambs that rushed off towards the south," said James Hogg. The man hurried down and soon saw the flock was a large one. "I really believe they are all here," said one. They counted them and were surprised to find that not one lamb of the great flock was. 700 was missing. He had Sirrah managed to get the 3 scattered divisions together. He had now that how had he managed to drive all the frightened little animals into this place of safety? Nobody could answer these questions, but there was no shepherd in Scotland that could have done better than Sirrah did that night. Long afterwards, James Hogg said, "I never felt so graceful to any creature below the sun as I did to Sirrah that morning." When James Hogg was a boy, his parents were too poor to send him to school by some means. However, he learned to read, and after that he loved nothing so much as a good book. There was no library near him, and it was hard for him to get books, but he was anxious to learn. Whenever he could buy or borrow a volume of prose or verse, he carried it with him until he had read it through. While watching his flocks, he spent much of his time in reading. He loved poetry and soon began to write poems of his own. These poems were read and admired by many people. The name of James Hogg became known all over the Scotland. He was often called the Ettrick Shepherd because he was the keeper of sheep near the Ettrick water. Many of his poems are still read and loved by children as well as by grown-up men and women. Here is one, a boy's song. Where the pools are bright and deep, where the grey trout lies asleep, up the river and over the lea, there's the way of Billy and me. Where the blackbird shines the lightest, where the hawthorn blooms the sweetest, where the nestling chirp and flee, there's the way for Billy and me. Where the moors mow the cleanest, where the hay lies thick and greenest, there to trace the homeward bee, there's the way of Billy and Me. Where the hazel bank is steepest, where the shadow falls the deepest, where the clustering nuts fall free, that's the way for Billy and Me. Why the boys should drive away, little maidens from their play, or love to banter and fight so well, that's the thing I never could tell. But this I know I love to play in the meadow among the heavy, up the water and over the lay. That's the way for Billy and Me. It's a truly inspirational tale and a great example of excellent moral values. Despite being written over the 100 years ago, the story is still relevant today. If you are looking for some inspirational stories, please consider subscribing. Thank you.